Kevin Walmsley's criticism of the Bloomberg article by Jennifer Jacobs is more than personal. It highlights a critical national and economic issue: the strategic management of the Philippines' natural resources. This situation illustrates the not invented here syndrome, where solutions or critiques are overlooked because they come from external sources. Walmsley's worries intensify with the Philippines considering restrictions on unprocessed ore exports to China. Such a move could inflate raw material costs, impacting companies like Direct Equipment Corporation. Despite official documents showing non-Filipino partners as minority stakeholders in Philippine ventures, their influence is considerable, like a shark controlling its surroundings, with strings being pulled from afar in China. Did you know that while Chinese companies enjoy massive government subsidies that significantly lower their costs in sea freight, they only pay for nickel recovery in the Philippines? This vast archipelago is not just a source of nickel, but also gold, silver, platinum, and more, essential for high-tech industries from semiconductors to healthcare innovations. But the Philippines has wised up. From 2010 to 2021, they stopped issuing new mining permits to halt predatory exploitation and reassessed their approach to mineral extraction. They've now embraced a groundbreaking technology, the direct nickel D&I process developed by Australia's Altilium Group. Unlike China's outdated methods that extract just a few components and leave the rest as waste, the D&I process can extract a comprehensive range of minerals efficiently and sustainably. This shift highlights a stark technological disparity and showcases why the world is cautious of China's approach, notorious for intellectual property infringement.
The case for private investment in the Philippines' mineral processing capabilities is compelling, as exemplified by global examples and supported by strategic economic theories like those of Harvard Business School's Michael Porter. In his analysis of Japan's post-World War II economic recovery, Porter highlighted how the Japanese government's selective support helped foster immense growth in sectors like automotive and consumer electronics, which received no initial financial aid. This approach catalyzed the rise of giants such as Toyota and Sony, illustrating how strategic non-intervention coupled with private investment can lead to sustainable industrial success. Drawing parallels, the Philippines stands at a critical juncture where private investment in technologies like D&I could pivot the nation towards sustainable development, avoiding the pitfalls of excessive governmental aid that has often led to dependency and inefficiency in other sectors globally. This strategy not only aligns with the need for ethical stewardship of resources but also presents a viable path to elevate indigenous communities and foster broad-based economic prosperity, countering the exploitative practices that have long undermined such goals. Thus, the narrative isn't merely about corporate interests or national policies, it's fundamentally about redefining development paradigms in a way that integrates ethical considerations with economic pragmatism, ensuring that the wealth beneath the soil translates into wealth above it, for all stakeholders involved. The economic repercussions of the mining practices in the Philippines have precipitated a stark imbalance, with the gravest toll exacted upon the communities least equipped to bear it, the indigenous populations residing near the mining sites. These groups, integral to the cultural and environmental fabric of the region, find themselves on the front lines of a crisis that reaches beyond environmental degradation to touch the very essence of economic disparity. Within this challenging landscape, the indigenous families, whose lives and livelihoods are intertwined with the land, receive a pittance that borders on negligible, an estimated $48 per year in royalty payments. This sum, alarmingly disproportionate to the wealth extracted from their ancestral territories, is rendered all the more inadequate against the backdrop of rising inflation and escalating costs of living. Such a meager amount not only fails to reflect the true value of the natural resources harvested but also falls woefully short of providing the financial means necessary for these families to relocate or to invest in improving their living conditions. This stark economic reality casts a long shadow, highlighting a grievous oversight in the stewardship of natural resources. It raises poignant questions about equity and the ethical responsibilities of both national governance and international business practices. For the indigenous communities affected, the situation is not merely an economic issue, it is a matter of survival and fundamental justice. Their plight underscores the calculated and distributed, ensuring that those who live on the land from which these valuable resources are drawn are fairly compensated. The pressing need for reform is clear. It requires a shift towards a more equitable model where the wealth generated by the land provides tangible benefits to those who have historically stewarded it. This model should not only increase the royalty payments but also ensure that these payments are in proportion to the profits earned from the resources. Such a change would not only alleviate the financial strain on these communities but also empower them to improve their own infrastructure, education, and healthcare systems, fostering sustainable development that is genuinely inclusive. Moreover, the broader implications of this situation extend to the international community, which must recognize its role in these dynamics. Global consumers and corporations benefiting from the minerals sourced from such regions have a moral imperative to support fair trade practices. This could be facilitated through international regulations that enforce transparent, equitable trade agreements to protect vulnerable communities and prevent the exploitation of their resources. Addressing these issues would serve not just the moral and ethical interests of justice but also enhance the social stability of the region. By ensuring that indigenous communities receive a fair share of the wealth extracted from their lands, we can help foster a more balanced economic environment where progress does not come at the cost of those least able to afford it. This is more than an economic reform, it is a commitment to human dignity and a step toward rectifying historical injustices that have marginalized indigenous populations for too long. In the intricate web of economic gains and ethical considerations surrounding the extraction of nickel and iron in the Philippines, the plight of the indigenous communities cannot be overlooked. While it may be convenient to absolve both the Philippine government and Chinese companies of direct blame, the ethical implications of their actions, or inactions, speak volumes about the broader moral landscape in which global businesses operate. Indeed, one may argue that there is no singular fault with any one party. However, the reality remains that the pursuit of profit has precipitated a deep ethical crisis. The indigenous groups, whose ancestral lands are rich with these coveted resources, endure hardships that starkly contrast with the prosperity enjoyed by companies capitalizing on these minerals. This disparity is not merely a business outcome, it is a profound ethical failure that demands rectification. In this context, businesses like Kevin Wamsley's Direct Equipment Corporation, which rely on the inexpensive procurement of nickel and iron, must be scrutinized. Their profitability hinges upon a model that undervalues both the natural resources and the human dignity of those who reside closest to them. It is untenable to continue a business practice that allows some to thrive while many others suffer greatly. There is a pressing need for a new paradigm, one that aligns economic activities with ethical standards. This shift would ensure that no company prospers at the expense of indigenous communities. It calls for rigorous ethical oversight and a re-evaluation of how resources are valued and compensated. It demands transparency in business dealings and a commitment to fair trade practices that honor the rights and contributions of all stakeholders, especially the indigenous populations. The situation presents not just a challenge, but an opportunity to redefine success in the mining sector. Success should not only be measured by the profit margins but also by the ability to generate economic benefits that are distributed equitably and sustainably. Moving forward, the business models must integrate principles of fairness and respect for human rights, ensuring that all can share in the wealth generated from their natural heritage without sacrificing their well-being or that of future generations. Thus, while it is easy to defer the ethical discussion for another day, the urgency of the matter at hand cannot be overstated. The time to act is now, ensuring that economic development no longer comes at the cost of the indigenous communities but rather uplifts them, paving the way for a truly inclusive and ethical global economy.